Hey guys, welcome back to the series that I'm calling The God Who Is Far and Near. If you're just joining me on this series, don't worry. Just to quickly recap what I talked about in the introduction video, we're going to be taking a look at how God perfectly balances the way that He is both transcendent and immanent. That is to say that He is both outside of the limitations of His creation, and yet He's actively inside it, working. And if those two ideas are very foreign to you and you have no idea what I'm talking about, and what I just said was not enough for you, you can go ahead and go back and watch the introduction video. Otherwise, you can just stay with me from here on out, because over the next couple of weeks, what I want to do is discuss how it is that we depend on both of those characteristics of God being true. The fact that He is both over and above His creation and not bound by the limitations that we experience, but yet He is active inside of His creation, working in us and through us and alongside us. And then I'm going to, after I discuss both of those two aspects of God, I'm going to conclude the series with a wonderful passage that shows just how perfectly God balances those two things and why we can actually apply that to our life as we're going through not only this pandemic experience that we're going through right now, but really all those times in life that are kind of hard and painful. And so I want to start this week by talking about God's transcendence. And when I think of God's transcendence, I think of Isaiah 55, verses 8 through 9, where it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Now, these couple of verses have been a source of comfort to those who love God for thousands and thousands of years. And they are comforting precisely because they assure us that God is transcendent. And there are two things in these verses that I think we really rely on when we're going through hard times that don't seem to make sense to us. And those are God's thoughts and His ways. Now, it really doesn't take a whole lot of humility to admit that we humans do not understand the world around us. We just do not understand why things work the way that they do. We think we do, but time always reveals that what we thought we knew, we didn't actually know. And I think a good illustration of this is actually when we look at kids. Most of us are born pretty curious little creatures, and we run around asking every adult that we can find this question: why? Right? Why are things the way they are? Just to show you what this usually looks like, right? And why I think it reveals that we don't understand the world as much as we think we do. You might be walking through a park with a child and they might see something like a goose. And they might turn to you and say, "Hey, why does that funny looking creature not have arms?" And you might say, "Well, because they have wings instead of arms." "Well, why do they have wings?" "Well, so they can fly." "Well, why do they fly?" "So they can get away from animals that want to eat them." "Why do animals want to eat them?" "Because some animals eat only meat." "Well, why do some animals only eat meat?" I don't know, kid, right? It's just the way that it is. Now, maybe you are, maybe you're more patient or intelligent than I am, but I always reach that point in the line of questioning where I just don't know the answer, right? I don't really understand everything about the world around me. And there are entire careers that are devoted to asking and answering these questions of why and how. Science itself exists because we don't fully understand the world around us. And some of us never stop asking those questions of why and how. But really, I think the fact that science exists reveals that we don't understand very much about the world around us. And furthermore, science continually reveals, to me at least, that we are often wrong in what we think. For example, and this is not to be controversial, just for fun, answer these couple of questions for me. How far can the coronavirus travel through the air? And will wearing a face mask keep you from getting the coronavirus? Now, if you don't understand the humor in those questions, do a quick Google search after this video is over, and you'll see what I mean. There are at least 5 to 6 answers for each one of those questions, and every one of them believe that they're right. They believe that they are speaking the truth. But obviously, they can't all be correct. And I think this points out why we depend on God to be transcendent. We need a God whose thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We depend on the fact that God is not limited by our ability to think and understand the world around us. We depend on the fact that God knows all things. God knows the answers to questions that we haven't even thought to ask yet. And I'm not just talking about Jeopardy questions, right? God's superior knowledge extends even into the hearts of men. God knows everything about you and me. He knows our doubts and our fears. He knows our mistakes and our weaknesses. God's transcendence means that you are fully known by him. And his thoughts toward you are what motivate his actions in the world, or as it says in Isaiah, his ways. Now the problem comes in when we attempt to use our limited understanding of the world to judge the goodness of God. And this is what lies behind the very essence of this passage. You see, God often works in ways that don't seem to make sense to us. But his ways are not limited to our temporal understanding of the world or our temporal sense of justice. And I think there's no greater example that we can find than the cross of Jesus Christ. Consider this. His loving thoughts toward you and I are what nailed Jesus to the cross. And so our desire to question God's ways are really no more rational than the 12-year-old who thinks their parents are the worst parents in the world because they won't let them get their way. See, God is a loving Father, and he knows, more than we know, what is ultimately good for us. And he always acts in accordance with that superior knowledge. And so it's God's transcendence that can give us peace amid what it is we're going through. And it is precisely because he is not limited to our way of thinking that we can confidently say in times of trouble that he is working all things out for our good and for his glory. Nothing ever happens that is not within his control. But, and really, the reason why I'm putting this series together, that doesn't mean that this isn't difficult. It doesn't mean that we brush aside the hardships that people are going through, because people are hurting mentally, physically, emotionally, and sooner or later, possibly financially. Currently, as I'm recording this, over 160,000 people in the world have already died from just this virus alone. And that means that easily, over 500,000 people are mourning the loss of someone that they love. And the numbers are still climbing. Over 5 million Americans are currently without work. And the emotional toll that all of this is taking on people is really only starting to come to the surface. There's the possibility that the financial fallout from all of this could perhaps be more dramatic than the disease itself. And so, it is to God's transcendence that we must turn our eyes if we are ever going to have any hope of finding the courage to rejoice during these trials and tribulations. God alone knows how hard this is for you, and he alone knows how to heal your heart, to calm your worried mind, and to provide for your every need. He knows what we need long before we ever even think to ask. And all he's asking from us is that we would trust him. And so if you are having a hard time reconciling how a good God could allow these things to take place, then turn your eyes towards his transcendence. The fact that he knows all things. He knows what is best for you and I. He knows what is best for his creation. He has a plan, and he is working that plan out. And it is for our good and for his glory. We just need to trust in his goodness and not use our temporal, limited understanding of the world around us to judge God's goodness. And so I hope that this message has been comforting to you. And next week we're going to take a look at how we don't just depend on a God who knows all things and is over and above his creation. We need a God who's willing to get down in the dirt with us. And in Jesus, that's precisely what we have. And so until next week, may God bless you and make you a blessing to others.